The crystalline spires of New Andoria gleamed like frozen lightning against the purple sky. Children played in floating gardens while their parents tended to art galleries that housed treasures from 1,000 worlds. Peace had reigned here for so long that the word war existed only in ancient history books, a relic from barbaric times when civilized beings supposedly fought each other over resources and territory. Talo pressed his scaled palm against the observation deck's warm surface, watching transport ships drift between the city towers like gentle butterflies. As defense coordinator for the outer colonies, his biggest concern had been mediating disputes between mining guilds and ensuring trade routes remained clear of space debris. The Galactic Peace Coalition had made such work routine almost boring. The first distress signal changed everything. "Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission from Kepler Station," his aide Vera called out, her usual calm voice cracking slightly. "They report unknown vessels approaching their system?" Talo turned from the window, his 4 eyes focusing on the main display screen. The transmission was fragmentary, filled with static and interference that made the words difficult to understand. Through the electronic noise, he could hear panic in the station commander's voice. "Multiple contacts, ... size unknown," not responding to hails, requesting immediate assistance. Then the signal died. Vera's fingers danced across her control panel, trying to re-establish contact. "Nothing, sir. All communication with Kepler Station has ceased." "Send a patrol vessel to investigate," Talo ordered, though something cold was already settling in his stomach. In 3 centuries of Coalition membership, no Andorian station had ever simply gone silent. Their technology was too advanced, their backup systems too redundant. The patrol ship reached Kepler Station's coordinates 18 hours later. What they found defied all understanding. The station was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely absent. In its place floated a cloud of metallic dust that analysis revealed to be the molecular remains of the station's hull material. Every trace of the 10,000 beings who had lived and worked there had vanished without explanation. More reports began flooding in from across the outer rim. Stations, mining colonies, even small worlds were disappearing one by one, leaving behind only those strange clouds of processed matter. The pattern became clear within days. Something was moving through Andorian space, consuming everything in its path. The Coalition's response was swift but ultimately useless. Defense fleets that had spent generations conducting ceremonial patrols and peaceful escort duties found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their databases. The ships that emerged from the void between galaxies defied conventional design, living vessels that pulsed with organic rhythms, their surfaces crawling with what looked like metallic parasites. Admiral Ross of the Coalition Defense Force tried traditional tactics first. His fleet approached the invaders in standard formation, broadcasting greetings in 47 languages and offering to negotiate. The response was immediate and devastating. Beams of corrosive energy tore through his ship's shields as if they were made of paper, while smaller craft swarmed out of the alien vessels like angry insects. Within hours, 3 full battle groups had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The few survivors who managed to escape brought back stories that chilled the Coalition Council to their cores. The enemy showed no interest in communication, negotiation, or even conquest in any recognizable sense. They simply consumed everything they encountered, breaking down matter at the molecular level and incorporating it into their own constantly growing fleet. The beings called themselves Ravagers, though this name came not from any attempt at communication, but from analysis of their few coherent transmissions. They spoke of hunger, of an endless need to feed and grow and spread across the galaxy like a cosmic plague. Their technology was as alien as their motives: ships that healed damage by consuming nearby matter, weapons that turned an enemy's own hull against them, defenses that adapted and evolved with each attack. Traditional warfare proved hopeless. Coalition forces had been designed for peacekeeping, their weapons calibrated for precision strikes that minimized casualties and collateral damage. Against an enemy that turned such restraint into weakness, these careful tactics became instruments of their own destruction. Talo, watched the tactical displays with growing horror as red markers spread across the star charts like a malignant infection. Entire systems were falling every few days, their populations either dead or absorbed into the Ravager Collective. At this rate, the core Andorian worlds would be under attack within months. The Coalition Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathering via quantum link to debate options that grew more desperate by the hour. Some proposed evacuation to distant galaxies, others suggested negotiation despite all evidence that the Ravagers had no interest in such concepts. A few radical voices even suggested developing new weapons, though such research had been banned. For centuries, it was Elder Nyx who first spoke the Forbidden's name. "There is one option we have not considered," the ancient Andorian said, his voice carrying the weight of reluctant necessity. "The archives speak of a quarantined world, a species deemed too dangerous for galactic society." Silence fell across the council chamber. Everyone knew the stories, though they were rarely discussed in polite company. 50 years ago, first contact protocols had been established with a small blue world in an unremarkable system. The inhabitants called themselves humans. An initial assessment suggested they might make valuable coalition members. That assessment changed rapidly as more information became available. These humans were unique among known sapient species. They had never achieved true peace. Their entire history was an unbroken chain of conflicts, wars, and violence that seemed to define their very nature. Even their entertainment celebrated combat, their literature glorified warriors, their children played games of imaginary battle. Most disturbing of all was their apparent enjoyment of warfare, where other species fought when necessary and sought peace as quickly as possible. Humans seemed to view conflict as a natural state of existence. They had developed their technology through military necessity, their society through organized violence, their very identity through competition and struggle. The Coalition had established a quarantine barrier around their system and classified them as too dangerous for contact. The humans had accepted this isolation with what observers called ominous good humor, apparently content to perfect their arts of war in solitude. Now, with extinction approaching, those same qualities that had made them pariahs might be exactly what the galaxy needed. "You suggest we contact the humans," Talo said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elder Nyx nodded slowly. "We have tried everything else. Our fleets cannot stop the Ravagers, our diplomats cannot reach them, our technology cannot match them. Perhaps it is time to unleash something the universe has never seen before." The vote was closer than anyone expected, passing by only 3 votes out of 47. As the council session ended, Talo found himself selected to lead the contact mission. Tomorrow, he would break a 50-year quarantine and ask monsters to save them all. The small diplomatic vessel shuddered as it crossed the quarantine barrier. Ancient warning systems screaming alerts in a dozen languages about unauthorized entry into restricted space. Ambassador Nira gripped her seat as the ship's hull groaned. Under the stress of exotic energy fields designed to keep the rest of the galaxy safe from what lay beyond, her pilot, a nervous young Andorian named Kex, kept glancing at his instruments with obvious fear. "Ma'am, we're getting multiple targeting locks from the inner system. Whatever's out there knows we're coming." Nira forced her voice to remain steady, despite the terror crawling up her spine. The humans had been isolated for 50 years, left alone to develop whatever twisted technologies their violent minds could conceive. Intelligence reports from before the quarantine had described weapons that could crack planets and defenses that bent space itself. What had they built in half a century of solitude? "Broadcast the ancient peace codes," she ordered. "All frequencies, all languages. Make sure they understand we come seeking help, not conquest." The response came faster than expected, cutting through their transmission with casual efficiency that spoke of technology far beyond Coalition standards. The voice that emerged from their speakers was rough, weathered, carrying an accent unlike anything in the galactic databases. "Unknown vessel, this is Luna Base Control. You are in violation of quarantine protocols established under Treaty 77 Alpha. State your purpose or prepare to be escorted out of the system. Nira swallowed hard, tasting copper fear on her tongue. Luna Base Control, this is Ambassador Nira of the Andorian Republic, operating under Emergency Coalition Authorization. We request immediate audience with human leadership regarding a matter of galactic security. A long pause followed, filled only with the hum of their ship's life support systems. When the voice returned, it carried a different tone, colder, more calculating. Ambassador, you will proceed to coordinates on transmitting now? Any deviation from the prescribed course will result in immediate interdiction. Do not test our patience. The coordinates led them past the outer planets of the Sol system, where Nira caught her first glimpse of human military technology. Orbital fortresses hung in space like metal spiders, their surfaces bristling with weapons that tracked their passage with mechanical precision. Each installation was larger than a coalition capital ship and radiated the kind of focused menace that made her scales itch with primitive alarm. Luna Base itself was a testament to human paranoia made manifest. Built into the gray moon's surface, it presented no obvious targets, while sensor arrays the size of city blocks monitored every cubic meter of nearby space. When their ship settled into the designated landing bay, armed guards in powered armor were already waiting. The humans themselves were smaller than Nira had expected. Bipedal mammals with soft skin and expressive faces that seemed designed for deception. But there was something in their movements, a coiled readiness that spoke of predators comfortable in their own bodies. The guards escorted her through corridors lined with displays showing human military history, an endless parade of conflicts, weapons, and strategic innovations that made her wonder how their species had avoided self-extinction. Colonel Hayes waited in a briefing room that doubled as a war museum. Weapons from every era of human conflict decorated the walls, from primitive clubs to energy rifles that hummed with barely contained power. The man himself was unremarkable at first glance, medium height, graying hair, wearing a simple military uniform. Only his eyes betrayed the truth, carrying the kind of cold intelligence that came from a lifetime of calculated violence. Ambassador, he said, gesturing to a chair designed for non-human physiology, I understand you have a problem that requires our particular expertise. Nira activated her portable display, showing the spread of Ravager attacks across Coalition space. Red zones expanded like bloodstains across the star map, marking worlds that no longer existed. We face extinction, Colonel. An enemy from beyond our galaxy that consumes everything in its path. Our fleets cannot stop them, our weapons cannot harm them, our diplomats cannot reach them. Hayes studied the tactical display with professional interest, his expression never changing as he absorbed the scope of the catastrophe. Numbers? Estimated enemy strength is 40,000 vessels of various sizes, supported by millions of smaller craft. They've consumed 67 star systems in the past month alone. Coalition response? 7 battle fleets deployed. All either destroyed or scattered. Nira's voice cracked slightly. Colonel, we're not warriors. We don't know how to fight something like this. For the first time, Hayes smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than any threat. But we do. The human leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of his face. Tell me about their tactics, their technology, their behavior patterns. Everything you know. For the next 2 hours, Nira provided every scrap of intelligence the Coalition had gathered about the Ravagers. Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a device that seemed to anticipate his thoughts. When she finished, he was quiet for several minutes, processing the information with the kind of systematic thoroughness that made her understand why humans had been quarantined. Interesting problem, he finally said. Classic swarm tactics combined with adaptive technology and no apparent regard for individual survival. They fight like a natural disaster, consuming resources without consideration for strategic objectives. Beyond expansion. Can you help us? Nira asked, hating how desperate her voice sounded. Hayes stood and walked to a wall display showing current human fleet positions. We can stop them, yes. But you need to understand what you're asking for, Ambassador. We're not Coalition peacekeepers. We don't fight to minimize casualties or preserve infrastructure. When humans go to war, we go to win, regardless of cost. We accept any cost if it means survival. Do you? Hayes touched a control, and the display shifted to show recorded footage from human conflicts. Cities burned, entire armies vanished in nuclear fire, orbital bombardments turned continents into glass. This is how we fight, Ambassador. Total war. Complete destruction of the enemy's ability to wage conflict. Are you prepared for the galaxy? To see this? Nero watched the images with growing horror and desperate hope. The humans weren't just warriors, they were artists of destruction, capable of violence on scales that dwarfed even the Ravager's consumption. How long would you need to mobilize? We've been ready since the quarantine began, Hayes replied. 200 volunteers from our best units, 1 ship, full tactical support. We can launch within 6 hours. Only 200? Nera couldn't hide her disappointment. She had hoped for fleets, armies, the kind of massive response the coalition would mount. Hayes smiled again, that cold expression that promised violence beyond imagination. Ambassador, you asked for our most brutal warriors. 200 humans are more than sufficient to show the galaxy what real warfare looks like. The question is whether you'll be able to live with the consequences. 3 hours later, Nero watched from Luna Base's observation deck as the human warship prepared for departure. The vessel itself was a work of art, sleek, deadly, built for speed and violence rather than the diplomatic elegance favored by coalition designs. Its hull absorbed light like a predator's camouflage, and its weapon systems hummed with barely restrained power. The ship is called Spearhead, Hayes explained, joining her at the observation window. Our newest and most advanced design. Experimental drive system, adaptive hull armor, weapons that can reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements. It's beautiful, Nero whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant beautiful or terrifying. It's necessary, Hayes corrected. Ambassador, when we reach your space, stay out of our way. Let us work. And be prepared for the fact that when this is over, the galaxy is going to look at humans very differently. The Spearhead engaged its drive system with a flash of exotic energy that bent space around its hull. One moment it was there, the next it was simply gone, leaving behind only a fading afterimage and the promise of violence to come. Nera remained at the window long after the ship's departure, wondering if she had just saved her people or doomed them all. The humans were coming to fight the Ravagers, but who would protect the galaxy from its protectors? Deep space erupted in torrents of green fire as Ravager bioships tore through another coalition defense line. The massive organic vessels pulsed with alien rhythms, their living hulls regenerating damage faster than conventional weapons could inflict it. Smaller attack craft swarmed around them like metallic parasites, stripping matter from disabled coalition ships and feeding it back to their mother vessels. Admiral Ross watched his tactical display with growing despair as red indicators marked the destruction of another battle group. His remaining forces were retreating in disorder, their carefully coordinated formations shattered by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move. The Ravagers fought like a living organism, each ship connected to a greater intelligence that adapted and evolved with terrifying speed. Sir, new contact approaching from the edge of the system, his sensor operator reported. Single vessel, unknown configuration. Ross barely glanced at the display. Another coalition ship arriving too late to matter, or perhaps a civilian transport fleeing the carnage. His attention remained fixed on the advancing Ravager fleet, counting the hours until they reached the inner colonies. Sir, the new contact is broadcasting coalition identification codes, but the signal is coming from inside our defensive perimeter. That got Ross's attention. His sensors showed the unknown ship materializing seemingly from empty space, its hull design unlike anything in coalition databases. The vessel was predatory in every line, built for speed and violence rather than the diplomatic elegance his own ships displayed. This is Spearhead to Coalition Command, a voice crackled over the COM system, speaking accented standard with casual confidence. We're here to help with your pest problem. Before Ross could Respond, the unknown ship accelerated past his defensive line at speeds that should have turned its crew into paste. Its hull shimmered with exotic energy fields as it dove straight into the Ravager formation. Weapon systems coming online with deadly precision. What happened next redefined Ross's understanding of warfare instead of engaging the main Ravager. Fleet, the human ship ignored the larger vessels entirely. It moved through the formation like a surgeon's blade, targeting communication nodes, sensor clusters, and what appeared to be coordination centers on the organic hulls. Each strike was precise, calculated, designed not just to damage but to blind and confuse. The Ravagers responded with overwhelming force, but their target had already moved. The human ship used their own formation against them, positioning itself so that Ravager weapons fired on their own vessels. When cornered, it deployed countermeasures that Ross had never seen before, fields that bent space, decoys that perfectly mimicked energy signatures, weapons that seemed to ignore conventional physics. "What are they doing?" his tactical officer whispered, watching the display in fascination and horror. Ross understood, even if he couldn't quite believe it. "They're not trying to destroy the fleet. They're trying to break their coordination." The human ship continued its impossible dance through the Ravager formation, each pass leaving another critical system damaged or destroyed. The organic vessels began to lose their unified response patterns, attacking randomly as their shared intelligence network fractured. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination now collided with each other, their living hulls writhing in apparent confusion. "Spearhead to coalition forces," the voice came again, calm despite the chaos around them. "Recommend you target the larger vessels now while they're disoriented. We've got them rattled." Ross didn't hesitate. All ships concentrated fire on the Lid Bio ship. Maximum intensity. The coalition barrage that followed would have been impressive against any normal enemy. Against the Ravagers, who had shrugged off similar attacks for weeks, it should have been useless. Instead, the massive bioship's hull cracked and bled, its regenerative systems overwhelmed by damage it couldn't quickly repair. The human ship had done something to change the equation, though Ross couldn't understand what. The battle turned into a rout within hours. Ravager vessels that had seemed invincible began dying under concentrated fire, their adaptive defenses somehow compromised. The smaller attack craft fled in disorder, abandoning their motherships to pursue individual survival rather than collective victory. When the shooting stopped, the human ship settled into formation with Ross's fleet as if nothing unusual had happened. The comm channel crackled with the same casual voice that had started the engagement. "Coalition Command, this is Lieutenant Commander Torres aboard Spearhead. We'll need to discuss tactical coordination for the next phase of operations." Ross stared at his display, trying to process what he had witnessed. A single human ship had done what his entire fleet could not: broken a Ravager formation and turned certain defeat into victory. "Spearhead, request immediate meeting with your command staff. We need to understand your tactics." "Understood. Preparing to receive visitors." "Fair warning, our methods might seem unusual by your standards." The shuttle bay of the human ship was unlike anything Ross had seen. Where coalition vessels emphasized comfort and diplomatic function, every surface here served a military purpose. Weapons racks lined the walls, tactical displays showed real-time updates of local space, and the crew moved with the kind of disciplined efficiency that spoke of constant readiness for combat. Torres herself was a compact woman with graying hair and scars that told stories of previous battles. Her uniform was practical rather than decorative, designed for function rather than ceremony. When she spoke, her words carried the authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death decisions. "Admiral, you've been fighting them wrong," she said without preamble. "You're trying to destroy their ships when you should be disrupting their collective intelligence." Ross studied the tactical hologram she projected, showing Ravager fleet movements with new annotations marking critical communication nodes. "You're saying they're a hive mind?" "Not exactly, but close enough for tactical purposes. Each ship contributes to a shared intelligence network that coordinates their movements. Disrupt that network and they revert to individual behavior patterns that are much less effective. How did you determine this so quickly? Torres smiled, and the expression reminded Ross of a predator sizing up prey. We've been studying them. Since the first reports reached Earth, humans are very good at understanding enemies. Admiral, it's what we do. The next few hours were a crash course in human military philosophy that left Ross both amazed and disturbed. These beings approached warfare with the same systematic thoroughness that coalition scientists applied to research projects. They had analyzed Ravager tactics, identified weaknesses, and developed countermeasures with ruthless efficiency. More unsettling was their casual acceptance of casualties and collateral damage. When Ross expressed concern about civilian populations in contested systems, Torres simply nodded and adjusted her tactical projections to account for evacuation routes and acceptable loss ratios. Admiral, you need to understand something, she said finally. We're not here to minimize damage or preserve infrastructure. We're here to win. If you want pretty victories with minimal casualties, you chose the wrong species. Ross found himself faced with an impossible choice. Accept human methods that violated every principle of civilized warfare, or watch his civilization die under Ravager assault. What do you need from us? Stay out of our way? Provide intelligence when requested. And be prepared for the fact that, when this is over, the galaxy is going to have some very uncomfortable questions about the nature of necessary violence. The human ship departed that night, leaving Ross to contemplate the implications of what he had witnessed. These beings weren't just warriors, they were artists of destruction, capable of violence on scales that dwarfed anything in coalition. Experience. They had turned warfare into a science, refined it into an art form, and they were very good at it. As his fleet regrouped and began pursuing the scattered Ravager forces, Ross realized that the galaxy's greatest threat might not be the alien invaders consuming their worlds. It might be the allies they had called upon to save them. The Crimson Nebula stretched across space like a wound in reality, its red gases swirling with electromagnetic storms that made sensor readings impossible beyond a few thousand kilometers. For the Ravagers, it represented perfect ambush territory, a place where their bioships could hide among the energy patterns and strike without warning. For Major Kim, it was the universe's gift-wrapped opportunity to demonstrate why humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. Her task force consisted of 17 human ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering designed for maximum lethality. Unlike the massive coalition vessels that announced their presence across entire star systems, these craft were built for stealth and speed, their hulls adapted to blend with local energy signatures. Analysis complete, her tactical officer reported. Ravager fleet strength estimated at 80 vessels arranged in a defensive sphere around what appears to be a resource processing facility. Kim studied the holographic display floating above her command station, noting the enemy formation with professional interest. The Ravagers had learned from their previous encounters with human forces, adopting tighter defensive patterns and maintaining better communication discipline. They were adapting, evolving their tactics in response to human pressure. It made them more dangerous, but also more predictable. They're expecting us to hit them head-on, she mused, tracing patterns in the tactical projection. Standard human doctrine would be to overwhelm their defensive perimeter with concentrated firepower. That's not what we're going to do, her aide observed. It wasn't a question, Kim smiled, the expression carrying all the warmth of a hunting predator. No, it's not. They want to fight humans, so we'll give them something else entirely. The plan she outlined over the next hour was complexity disguised as simplicity. Instead of attacking the Ravager formation, her ships would use the nebula's electromagnetic properties to create a massive sensor blind spot. The enemy would lose track of human forces, just as the humans lost track of them. Except humans had spent centuries fighting in conditions where technology failed and instinct became paramount. Phase 1 begins in 30 minutes, Kim announced. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their fleet. We're trying to turn it into a weapon against itself. The first indication the Ravagers had of human presence was when their sensors began registering impossible readings throughout the nebula. Ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Energy signatures flickered in and out of existence, and electromagnetic pulses disrupted communication between vessels. What they didn't realize was that every false reading, every sensor ghost, every communication disruption was precisely calculated. Kim's ships weren't hiding in the nebula, they were turning it into an extension of their weapon systems. The attack began from 17 different vectors simultaneously, each strike timed to arrive at the exact moment the Ravagers' defensive systems would be most vulnerable. Human ships materialized from electromagnetic storms, fired precisely targeted salvos, then vanished back into the swirling gases before return fire could find them. But the real genius of the assault wasn't in its coordination, it was in its psychology. Each attack was designed not just to inflict damage, but to force specific responses from the Ravager fleet. When their outer vessels moved to investigate sensor contacts, they exposed gaps in their defensive formation. When they tried to close those gaps, they created new vulnerabilities that human forces exploited with surgical precision. "They're starting to panic," Kim's sensor operator reported, watching as Ravager ships began firing at false targets. "Fleet cohesion is breaking down." Kim nodded, but her attention was focused on the tactical display. The enemy was responding exactly as her analysis had predicted, their formations slowly collapsing as individual commanders made decisions based on incomplete information. What had started as a defensive sphere was becoming a chaotic tangle of ships firing in all directions. "Phase 2, she ordered. "Begin the dance." If the first phase had been about disruption, the second was pure artistry. Human ships began moving through the Ravager formation in carefully orchestrated patterns, each vessel following routes calculated to maximize confusion and friendly fire incidents. They used the enemy's own defensive systems against them, positioning themselves so that Ravager weapons targeted their own allies, the bioships' adaptive hulls. Normally, their greatest strength became liabilities as they absorbed energy from their own weapons and began mutating in unpredictable ways. Communication networks that had been precisely tuned for coordination became sources of contradictory information as human electronic warfare systems fed false data into their organic processors. "Sir, coalition forces are requesting permission to engage," her communications officer reported. Kim shook her head without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Negative. Tell them to maintain position and observe. This is a teaching moment." What she was teaching was that warfare wasn't just about superior technology or overwhelming force. It was about understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. The Ravagers fought like a biological organism, which meant they could be confused, misdirected, and turned against themselves using techniques developed in Earth's urban warfare academies. The battle reached its climax when Kim's flagship emerged from an electromagnetic storm directly above the Ravager processing facility. Instead of attacking the installation, she targeted the gravitational anchor points that kept it stable within the nebula's chaotic environment. The facility began to drift, its massive bulk pulled by conflicting gravitational fields. Ravager ships moved to stabilize their prize, abandoning their defensive positions to prevent the loss of whatever resources they had been processing. It was exactly the response Kim had been waiting for. "All units, convergent strike pattern. Target the communication hubs while they're distracted." 17 human ships struck simultaneously, their weapons precisely targeted at the organic nodes that coordinated Ravager fleet movements. The effect was immediate and devastating. 80 enemy vessels suddenly found themselves cut off from their collective intelligence, reduced to individual ships operating on instinct and confusion. What followed wasn't so much a battle as a systematic dismantling. Human forces picked apart the scattered Ravager ships one by one, using superior tactics and coordination to defeat an enemy that outnumbered them more than 4-1. When the shooting stopped, debris clouds marked the positions of 73 destroyed bio-ships. The survivors fled deeper into the nebula, their formation shattered and their confidence broken. Coalition Command, this is Major Kim, she broadcast on the standard command frequency. Crimson Nebula is secure. Ravager processing facility captured intact. Minimal friendly casualties. The response came from Admiral Ross himself, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and unease. Major, that was extraordinary. How did you coordinate such a complex engagement in a sensor-blind environment? Kim settled back in her command chair, already planning the tactical briefing she would give to coalition forces. Admiral, what you just witnessed wasn't extraordinary by human standards. It was basic small unit tactics adapted for a space environment. We've been fighting this way for thousands of years. Fighting who? Each other, Kim replied simply. Humans are very good at war because we've had so much practice. The question you need to ask yourself is whether you're prepared for your people to learn what that really means. The captured Ravager facility yielded intelligence that changed the entire strategic picture. The bioships weren't just consuming matter for expansion, they were processing it into a form that could be transmitted across galactic distances, feeding some vast intelligence in the space between galaxies. The invasion wasn't random predation. It was resource gathering on a scale that dwarfed anything previously imagined. Kim transmitted her findings to both human and coalition command, along with tactical recommendations that made her earlier operations look conservative by comparison. If the Ravagers were truly just the advanced scouts of something larger, then the galaxy needed to prepare for a war unlike anything in its history. As her task force regrouped and prepared for the next engagement, Kim found herself wondering if even human military expertise would be sufficient for what was coming. The Ravagers had proven adaptable, learning from each encounter and evolving their tactics in response to human pressure, but humans had been evolving too, their warfare becoming more sophisticated and more deadly with each passing generation. If the universe wanted to test humanity's capacity for violence, it had chosen the wrong species to underestimate. The Ravager mothership dominated local space like a metallic cancer, its biomechanical hull stretching across dimensions that hurt to contemplate. Sensor readings suggested the vessel was larger than most moons, its surface crawling with defensive systems that had been grown rather than built. At its core pulsed something that human instruments could barely detect, an intelligence so vast it seemed to bend reality around itself. Colonel Hayes studied the tactical projections with the kind of professional detachment that came from a lifetime of impossible missions. Around him, the command center of the human fleet buzzed with quiet activity as his staff prepared for what everyone understood would be their final engagement. Exterior defenses are adaptive bio-armor with integrated weapon systems, his intelligence officer reported. Estimated thickness of 40 kilometers, capable of regenerating damage faster than conventional weapons can inflict it. Internal structure appears to be organic corridors filled with defensive organisms and environmental hazards. Hayes nodded, unsurprised by the analysis. The Ravagers had built their command vessel to be impregnable, a fortress that could withstand anything the galaxy might throw at it. Unfortunately for them, they hadn't considered what humans might choose to throw at themselves. Sir, Coalition Command is requesting our tactical assessment, his communications officer said. Admiral Ross wants to coordinate a joint assault. Tell the Admiral that Coalition forces should maintain minimum safe distance, Hayes replied. This isn't the kind of operation where more ships equal better odds. The plan he outlined over the next hour was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Instead of trying to breach the mothership's exterior defenses, human forces would infiltrate the vessel through its organic waste disposal systems. Teams of volunteers would navigate the creature's digestive tract, locate its central nervous system, and plant charges designed to trigger catastrophic neural cascade failure. It was, by any reasonable measure, a suicide mission. Sir, we've run the probability models 3 times, his tactical analyst said quietly. Even optimistic projections show survival rates below 15% for infiltration teams. Hayes absorbed this information without visible reaction. How many volunteers do we have? All of them, sir. Every human aboard the fleet has requested assignment to infiltration teams. For the first time in the briefing, Hayes smiled. It was an expression that combined pride, sadness, and the kind of cold determination that had carried humanity through millennia of warfare. Select teams based on tactical requirements, not enthusiasm. We'll need specialists in demolitions, BO systems, and close-quarters combat. The selection process took hours, not because humans were reluctant to volunteer for certain death, but because Hayes had to choose between equally qualified candidates who all desperately wanted to be included. In the end, he assembled 12 teams of 10 specialists each, leaving the majority of his forces aboard ship to provide support and coordinate escape routes that everyone knew would never be used. Sergeant Rodriguez found herself selected for Alpha Team, assigned to navigate the deepest sections of the mothership's organic interior. At 32, she was a veteran of conflicts that had tested human ingenuity in urban warfare, zero-gravity combat, and hostile environment operations. None of that experience had prepared her for what they were about to attempt. The infiltration began at dawn, ship time, with 12 assault shuttles launching from human vessels positioned at the edge of sensor range. Each craft was equipped with experimental stealth systems and biomimetic hulls designed to fool the mothership's organic sensors into recognizing them as waste matter suitable for processing. Rodriguez watched through her shuttle's viewport as the massive vessel grew larger, its surface revealing details that defied rational understanding. The hull wasn't just alive, it was actively aware. Sensory organs the size of buildings tracking their approach, while defensive systems reconfigured themselves in real-time response to perceived threats. 2 minutes to breach, her pilot announced, his voice steady despite the fact that they were flying directly into the digestive system of a creature large enough to swallow planets. The entry point was a sphincter-like opening that dilated as their shuttle approached, revealing a tunnel lined with what looked like metallic teeth. Corrosive enzymes dripped from the walls, capable of breaking down any known material in seconds. Only their biomimetic coating kept them from being dissolved instantly. Remember, we have maybe 30 minutes before our protection fails, Rodriguez told her team as they prepared for insertion. After that, we're running on borrowed time in emergency suits. The shuttles deposited their human cargo at junction points deep within the mothership's organic infrastructure, then self-destructed to prevent the enemy from analyzing human technology. 12 teams found themselves alone in corridors that pulsed with alien life, surrounded by defensive systems that viewed them as foreign antibodies to be eliminated. What followed was warfare unlike anything in human experience. The corridors themselves were hostile, walls that could close without warning, floors that opened into acid-filled chambers, ceilings that rained down cellular toxins designed to break down organic matter. The enemy didn't just defend territory. It was the territory. Every surface a potential weapon. Rodriguez's team fought their way deeper into the vessel using techniques developed in Earth's most hostile environments. They moved like urban warfare specialists navigating a living city, using explosive charges to create new pathways when the existing ones became impassable. Their weapons were designed for close-quarters combat in zero atmosphere, firing rounds that could penetrate bio-armor without triggering catastrophic decompression. The deeper they went, the more alien their environment became. Corridors gave way to vast chambers filled with processing organs the size of office buildings. Nutrient flows carried dissolved matter from conquered worlds, while specialized organisms sorted useful materials from waste products. At the center of it all pulsed something that human minds could barely comprehend, a brain structure so complex it seemed to exist in dimensions beyond normal space. Alpha Team to all units, Rodriguez reported as her squad reached their assigned target zone. We found the primary neural cluster. Beginning demolition setup. The charges they planted weren't conventional explosives. Human scientists had designed them specifically to disrupt the quantum processes that enabled the mothership's consciousness, triggering a cascade failure that would propagate throughout its nervous system. Each team carried enough explosives to cripple a city, but they needed to place them at precise points to ensure the entire structure would collapse. The mothership's defenses grew more desperate as human teams approached their objectives. Immune system responses flooded the corridors with antibodies the size of attack craft, while the walls themselves began secreting toxins designed to kill any life form not specifically adapted to the vessel's internal environment. Rodriguez lost 3 team members to a defensive organism that dissolved their protective suits with targeted acid sprays. 2 more died when a corridor suddenly compressed, crushing them before they could retreat. By the time her team reached their final objective, only 5 humans remained from the original 10. "Charges placed and armed," she reported, her voice echoing through corridors that seemed to pulse with growing awareness of the threat they represented. "Recommend immediate detonation sequence." "Negative, Alpha Team," Hayes' voice crackled through the comm system. "Wait for confirmation that all teams are in position. We only get one chance at this." And the next 20 minutes stretched like hours as the remaining infiltration teams fought their way to their assigned positions. Rodriguez's squad held their ground in a chamber that had become increasingly hostile, its walls secreting enzymes that ate through their equipment while defensive organisms probed for weaknesses in their formation. "This is Bravo Team, charges. Placed and ready, Charlie Team in position, explosives armed." One by one, the surviving teams reported successful placement of their demolition packages. Of the 120 humans who had entered the mothership, 37 remained alive and in communication. The others had died buying time and territory with the kind of calculated sacrifice that defined human military doctrine. "All teams, this is Colonel Hayes." The command frequency crackled with interference from the mothership's defensive systems. "Detonation in 60 seconds. It has been an honor serving with you all." Rodriguez checked her team's protective gear one final time, knowing it wouldn't be enough. The explosions they were about to trigger would turn the entire vessel into a death trap, its corridors flooding with toxic gases and structural debris. Even if the charges worked perfectly, their chances of reaching extraction points were minimal. 30 seconds, Hayes announced. "Remember, we're not just fighting for the Coalition. We're showing the universe what humans are capable of when pushed to our limits." The detonation began as a vibration felt through the ship's living hull, then built into a cascade of destruction that propagated along neural pathways like lightning through a nervous system. The mothership's consciousness, vast and alien as it was, simply ceased to exist as the quantum structures supporting it collapsed. What followed was chaos on a scale that dwarfed anything in the previous battle. The vessel's biological systems, suddenly deprived of central coordination, began attacking each other in confused desperation. Corridors that had been precisely controlled environments became mazes of random destruction as defensive systems triggered without purpose or coordination. Rodriguez led her surviving team through collapsing passages as the mothership died around them. They navigated by instinct and training, following emergency beacons that marked extraction routes planned during the mission briefing. Behind them, the alien vessel tore itself apart in mechanical agony. They reached the extraction point just as their shuttle pilot, operating on emergency protocols, managed to dock with an emergency airlock that was still functional. Of the 12 infiltration teams, only 7 members survived to evacuation: Rodriguez and 6 other specialists who had fought their way through the dying vessel's final convulsions. The mothership's death took 3 hours, its massive hull cracking along stress lines as internal pressures overwhelmed structural integrity. When the end came, it was visible across the entire star system, a brief flash of light as exotic matter containment failed, followed by an expanding debris field that would drift for millennia. The remaining Ravager fleet, suddenly deprived of central coordination, scattered like leaves in a storm. Individual vessels fled toward the galactic rim, their collective intelligence broken and their invasion plans abandoned. In a matter of hours, the threat that had consumed dozens of worlds simply ceased to exist as an organized force. Hayes watched the tactical displays from his command ship, noting the successful completion of objectives with the same professional detachment he had shown throughout the campaign. Around him, his surviving staff processed casualty reports and began planning for the fleet's return to Coalition space. "Sir, Coalition Command is requesting immediate debriefing," his communications officer reported. "They want to understand how we achieved victory with such minimal forces." Hayes considered the request, then shook his head. "Tell them we'll provide a full tactical analysis when we return. For now, we have other priorities." Those priorities included honoring the 93 humans who had died to save a civilization that had spent 50 years calling them monsters. The memorial service was brief but profound, conducted in the human tradition of acknowledging sacrifice without romanticizing warfare itself. As the fleet prepared for the journey home, Hayes found himself contemplating the implications of what they had accomplished. The humans had proven themselves as both saviors and destroyers, capable of violence beyond imagination when necessity demanded it. The galaxy had been saved, but at the cost of revealing just how dangerous its protectors truly were. The quarantine around Earth had been established to protect the galaxy from human violence. Now that violence had saved them all, leaving the Galactic Coalition to wrestle with an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the monsters you fear are exactly what you need to survive. The journey back to Coalition space would take weeks, giving Hayes time to prepare reports that would reshape galactic politics for generations. The humans were no longer isolated pariahs, but proven warriors whose methods, however brutal, had achieved the impossible. Whether the galaxy would thank them or fear them remained to be seen.